Can you believe it? Some children are willing to turn their backs on their own mother. All for money. This is the heartbreaking story of Evelyn Carter, 62 years old, a widow living in the quiet outskirts of Texas. She spent her entire life raising 3 children, protecting the old wooden house that carried the soul of her family. But when heart disease left her weak, 2 of her children, David, 38, and Linda, 35, returned. They didn't bring love. They didn't bring care. They brought the plan to sell the house and split the money. "Sell it, Mom. It's only fair." The cold words cut through the room like a knife into a mother's heart. Evelyn shook her head, her voice trembling. "This house is a promise to your father. It's not something to be divided and sold." The air grew heavy. On the table lay papers, numbers, and the greedy eyes of her own children. The price Evelyn now faced was more than losing her home. It was her dignity, her motherhood, and her last piece of faith in family. The house that once held laughter was turning into a battlefield. The children who once gave her strength had become her rivals. This isn't just a family tragedy. It is a fierce chapter in the long chain of bitter revenge stories. And this was only the beginning. Evelyn Carter, 62 years old, was a widow living on the quiet edge of a Texas town. She wasn't wealthy, she wasn't powerful, yet everyone knew her name. To them, Evelyn was the woman who sacrificed everything for her family. After the death of her husband, John Carter, she carried the heavy burden of raising 3 children on her own. Time carved deep lines into her face, but it never stole the strength shining in her eyes. Every morning began the same. At 5 o'clock, the alarm rang. Evelyn slipped into her old sweater, walked down to the kitchen, and brewed a cup of black coffee. She always poured it into the chipped ceramic mug that once belonged to John. People often told her to throw it away. She would just shake her head and whisper, "This crack reminds me. Love isn't perfect, but it lasts." Then she would step out to the porch, sit in a wooden rocking chair, and watch the rose garden her husband once tended with care. Her 3 children could not have been more different. David, the eldest, was intelligent but consumed by ambition. He left town early to chase success and rarely returned. Linda, the second child, was graceful with words, but her heart always leaned toward herself. And then there was Mark, the youngest. Mark stayed. He refused a better job in another city so he could care for his mother, preparing her meals, bringing her medicine each day. One evening, Evelyn asked softly, "Aren't you afraid of missing opportunities, Mark?" He smiled. "Opportunities can always return, but Mom, I only have one of you." Those words warmed Evelyn's heart, but also cut her with sadness. Mark was the only one who knew her secret. In the back of an old drawer, Evelyn kept a small tape recorder. On it was John's final message, his fading voice mixed with Evelyn's own. "This house will stay with Evelyn, and later it will belong to Mark, the one who never left our side." That was the set-up rule, the truth, the shield, the promise. Evelyn didn't hold it to favor Mark. She held it because he was the only one who had never abandoned her. Most afternoons, Evelyn and Mark sat together in the living room, a place where the walls were covered with family photos. She would point to their wedding picture. "Do you see this, Mark? This house has witnessed my whole life. Your father told me once, this house is the soul of our family. If we lose it, we lose everything." Mark nodded firmly, his eyes burning with determination. "Then I'll protect it, Mom. No matter what." Life seemed steady, quiet, almost peaceful. But storms always begin with whispers. One afternoon, while Evelyn watered the roses, she overheard Linda on the phone outside. Her daughter's voice was sharp, stripped of warmth. "David, we can't let Mom keep that house forever. If we sell it, at least you'll clear your debts. Just call it fair. She won't be able to refuse." Evelyn froze. Her hand shook, spilling water across the dirt. The betrayal struck her chest like a stone. That night, she sat alone in the living room. On the table lay the tape recorder. She pressed play. John's voice filled the silence. "This house belongs only to Evelyn and Mark. This is my final decision." Tears slid down her wrinkled hands. She knew the storm was coming, and it would rise from the very children she had once carried in her arms. Outside the window, headlights swept across the empty street. David's car had returned, but this time, he wasn't coming home just to visit his mother. That afternoon, when Evelyn returned home from the hospital after a mild heart attack, The old wooden house no longer felt peaceful. The air was heavy. David and Linda, after years of distance, appeared at the door together. On the surface, they looked proper. But in their eyes, cold calculation, not warmth. Evelyn sat in her worn wooden armchair, clutching the chipped ceramic mug she always used for coffee. Mark stood quietly at her side, like a shield. David placed a thick folder on the table, his tone low but sharp. "Mom, we need to be realistic. You're not healthy anymore. This house is too big. Keeping it only adds burden. Sell it. Split it fairly." Linda crossed her arms, her lips curling slightly. "Exactly. You should think of all of us. David has a family to support. I do too. Just because Mark is here doesn't mean he deserves everything." Evelyn's grip tightened on the mug. Her voice trembled. "You call that fair? Since when is trampling over your father's words fair? This house is not for sale." Silence. The air turned to stone. Mark glared at his siblings, ready to speak, but Evelyn raised a hand. She would face them herself. The next day, something darker arrived. Evelyn found a plain envelope in the mailbox. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Inside lay a printed email, carrying Mark's exact electronic signature. Its words stabbed her heart. Evidence insert number 1, email log, 10:45 a.m., from mark.carter@email.com to davidcarter@email.com. Subject: the house. Don't worry, I'll handle Mom and get her to sign the papers. She's weak now, she won't resist. What matters is that we split it equally. Evelyn staggered, her vision blurring. She stumbled into the kitchen, where Mark was fixing the kettle. Her voice rasped. "Mark, explain this. What is this? Why would you send something like this?" Mark turned, stunned at the paper in her hand. His face drained of color. "No, Mom, that's not me. I never wrote those words. Someone forged it." Linda entered, her eyes red as if she had been crying. "See, Mom? I told you. Mark wants to take it all. I didn't want to believe it, but now the truth is right here." David folded his arms, voice heavy. "We need honesty. You can't just take Mark's side. Clearly he's been planning this for a long time." Evelyn's breath caught. Her hands trembled as they crushed the paper. Everything she had sacrificed, all the trust she'd placed in Mark, suddenly shattered by one cold proof. Mark stepped forward, eyes glistening. "Mom, I swear, I have never betrayed you. All I want is to keep this house, just like Dad asked." But Linda cried louder, clinging to Evelyn's shoulders. "Why, Mom? Why are you always favoring Mark? Aren't we your children too?" The living room, once filled with warmth, now echoed with sobs and accusations. Evelyn felt her chest tighten, her breath shorten. In her mind, John's voice rang again. "This house is the soul. Don't let anyone take it away." That night, Evelyn sat alone in the dark. The forged email lay on the table, its words smudged with her tears. Deep inside, she knew Mark would never write it. Yet why was the evidence so clear? Why had her own children turned into enemies? Pressing a hand to her chest, she whispered as if to her late husband, "John, do you see this? They're destroying everything." Her eyes closed, a sharp pain stabbing her heart. She didn't know yet that this email was only the beginning. Because behind it, even crueler blows were waiting. But worse was coming. After the shock of the forged email, the Carter house no longer felt the same. Afternoon lights scraped across the wooden walls, dust floating like smoke. Evelyn held her chipped ceramic mug, each step hesitant, as if even the floorboards had ears. She believed in Mark's innocence, but the town had turned its back. From the market stalls to the church pews, the whispers never stopped, a mother favoring her youngest. Nods, sighs, and short texts carried the story further. 3 side incidents followed, each with a spark, a reaction, and a minor outcome, each pushing the widow deeper into isolation. Linda started calling relatives, old friends, even vendors at the market. Her voice cracked with practiced pain. "Mom is weak. Mark keeps the keys. He won't let us visit. We only want fairness." David added fuel. "The house is too big. Keeping it is wasteful. Selling helps everyone." Doubt began to grow legs. Reaction. The next morning, Evelyn stopped at her usual vegetable stand. "How are you today?" she asked softly. The seller turned away, leaned on her basket, muttered, "I'm fine." 2 women nearby whispered, "They say she let Mark take control of everything." Evelyn clutched her bag tighter. The walk through the market suddenly felt endless. At the grocery, the cashier avoided her gaze, handed her the receipt without a word. At church, she was quietly moved to the back row for convenience. Evelyn smiled, but her hands shook as she set the mug on the wooden table. Mark whispered, "Let me explain to them." Evelyn shook her head. "Don't. The more we speak, the more they cling." Evelyn's lifetime of reputation cracked. Greetings grew fewer, replaced by silence thick as walls. She realized in a small town, rumor always outran truth. David and Linda escalated. They invited the whole family to clear misunderstandings. The living room, once warm, with wedding photos and certificates, now packed with bodies and the screech of moving chairs. Linda stood in the middle, crushing a tissue. "I just want Mom to share equally. She lets Mark decide everything? Aren't we her children too?" David dropped a folder on the table, voice heavy. "We all carry responsibility. Selling the house makes sense." An uncle slammed his palm. "Evelyn, you cannot play favorites." Evelyn placed her mug carefully to keep it from spilling. "I'm honoring John's wish. He said the house must stay with me, then with Mark." Linda tilted her head, tears dropping at the perfect moment. "You say that, but where's the proof?" Mark tried to rise, but Evelyn gripped his hand. "Let me." She faced the room. "I will not sell." The silence froze. An aunt murmured, "At least share a portion, for decency's sake." Evelyn's reply was short. "His wish is written." The words fell flat, no echo. Not a single relative stood by Evelyn. When the meeting ended, only the drag of slippers echoed on the porch. Linda whispered just loud enough for some to hear. "Then we'll take it to court." Evelyn closed the door, leaning against the wood, her house suddenly feeling foreign. 2 days later, David produced an aged paper, scribbles resembling Evelyn's handwriting but missing a signature. He raised it before a quick family gathering. "This is what Mom wrote. Sell the house, split it." Linda added, "We only want fairness." Evelyn took the page with both hands, held it close, smelled the damp paper. Her voice cracked. "I never leave notes without a signature. This is not mine." Linda sneered. "If you could hide one, we can find another." An aunt sighed. "Where there's smoke, there's fire." Mark raised his voice louder than usual. "This note is fake." David flicked the corner, "Then prove it." The paper became a psychological weapon, passed hand to hand until it hardened into truth. That night, the story escaped the living room, spilled into family chats, reshaped into Mom once agreed. Evelyn sat at her desk, drawer open. Inside lay John's original journal and the recorder. She closed it firmly, resisting. In her mind, she ordered her thoughts. Law before emotion, evidence before defense. Outside, wind rattled the rose bushes, leaves rustled like paper. After 3 consecutive strikes, isolation framed her life. In the mornings, fewer doorbells. At night, only pharmacy reminders for her heart medicine. Evelyn clung to routines, spooning coffee to the exact line, pouring water to the rim of her chipped mug, placing the photo album back in its spot. She whispered to Mark, "I will not leave this house." He replied firmly, "I'm here, Mom." The bond tightened between them, while the rest of the family unraveled strand by strand. Meanwhile, David and Linda pushed their campaign harder. Trigger. Linda visited Mrs. Margaret, the neighbor braced. After the blows of rumors and forged notes, Evelyn was drained. But David and Linda weren't finished. Convinced public opinion leaned entirely their way, they prepared their next strike, dragging the family battle into court. The day Evelyn received the official summons from the town courthouse, her hands trembled. The bold black letters felt like stones pressing on her chest. The hearing was set for the following week. In the living room, David placed a leather briefcase on the table. Linda sat beside him, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with triumph. "Mom, if you sign now, we can avoid humiliation in court. Just agree to sell the house, and this ends." Evelyn's voice was slow, raspy, but firm. "This house is not for sale. It was your father's wish." Mark snapped, "You're twisting family ties for your gain." David shot him a glare. "Shut up. You're the one manipulating her." The preliminary hearing unfolded in a cramped room with low ceilings and harsh yellow lights. Evelyn sat on the left with Attorney Harris. She looked tired, but kept her back straight. Across the aisle, David and Linda appeared in polished outfits, flanked by a lawyer unfamiliar to the townsfolk. The man was Richard, Linda's husband. For years he had stayed quiet, distant. But now, sitting tall with piercing eyes, he revealed himself as the true mastermind. A few minutes of their presentation, and Evelyn understood. Richard had been pulling the strings all along. Their lawyer argued. Evelyn was elderly, no longer sound of mind, manipulated by Mark. The house, he claimed, should be sold for fairness and reason. Harris objected immediately. But David rose with theatrical conviction. We only want to preserve family harmony. No one should take everything for themselves. Gasps and murmurs stirred in the room. Richard gave a small signal. Linda stood and held up a small worn notebook. This is Mom's diary. In it, she wrote she feared Mark's control and wanted the house divided. Evelyn's eyes widened, her voice cracking. That is not my writing. I never wrote such a thing. The judge banged his gavel. It will be examined. Evidence insert number 3, diary entry, timestamp unknown. Mark is hot-tempered. He forces me to obey. I fear for the family's property. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Evelyn felt the ground slip beneath her feet. She glanced at Mark. His face had gone pale, fists clenched. Mom, that isn't your handwriting. I know. Evelyn nodded through tears. But the eyes of relatives and townspeople had already shifted. When they stepped outside, the crowd swarmed. A woman whispered, "Poor thing, too old to resist her son's manipulation." A man sneered, "Greedy, why keep it all?" Evelyn lowered her head, chest tightening. Harris guided her toward the car, his voice calm but strained. "We'll request handwriting analysis. Don't give up, there's still a way." Yet Evelyn felt every door slamming shut. The blows kept coming. The very next day, Mark's company, where he worked part-time to help support his mother, called. His supervisor's voice was blunt. "Until the case clears, we must suspend you. The company's reputation is at risk." Mark froze, the phone slipping from his hand. "Mom, they don't trust me anymore." Evelyn embraced him, her heart twisting with guilt. If not for me, Mark wouldn't be dragged into this storm. That night, Evelyn sat alone in the living room. She opened the family album, fingers trembling over her wedding photo with John. Tears streamed freely. "John, do you see this? Our children are destroying everything we built." She switched on the tape recorder. John's familiar voice filled the silence. "This house is the soul. Don't let anyone take it." But tonight, the words felt faint, like a whisper lost in the storm of doubt. Then, just as despair wrapped tighter, Harris arrived with a folder. "Evelyn, I found it. A notarized copy of John's will, sealed and witnessed. It remains valid." Evelyn clutched the paper, eyes lighting with fragile hope. Mark leaned in. "This is the truth. Dad's final word." Evelyn nodded. For the first time in days, a spark returned to her gaze. She understood now. There was only one path forward. Fight with the truth, with the law, with the will John had left behind. She whispered, "If my children want war, then I will give them war. I won't just defend. I will strike back." Evelyn placed the will into the drawer, her hands trembling but steady. For the first time, she thought not only of survival, but of justice, of revenge. And the revenge would be built on the settle she and John had prepared long ago. The real battle was only beginning. After the preliminary hearing, Evelyn Carter returned home exhausted, yet burning with determination. She knew if she kept enduring in silence, everything would slip away. That night, in the still darkness, Evelyn and Mark began to craft a plan for revenge. Not revenge through violence, but through truth, through law, and through evidence that could not be denied. Evelyn named it CAGE. Collect, align, gamble, edge. Collect, gather. The first step was to piece together every fragment of truth. Evelyn unlocked a wooden drawer and pulled out a small box of keepsakes. Inside were John's old journal, a recorder, and scattered handwritten notes. She handed them to Harris, the family lawyer. "Each of these," she said firmly, "is a trace of truth. I won't let them turn to ashes." Mark helped her search the attic and found an old stack of printed emails. One of them, written years ago by Linda to a friend, read, "My parents are old, always sick. Thank goodness Mark stayed to handle everything." Evelyn's lips curved into a faint smile. She admitted it herself. They also had dozens of old tapes John had recorded. In one, his gravelly voice said, "Mark, the child who stayed, this house must belong to him and his mother." Harris nodded. "These tapes can be supplemental evidence, but we'll need to prove they're authentic." The allies were clear now. Mark, the loyal youngest son, Harris, the trusted lawyer, and Mrs. Margaret, the neighbor who had seen Mark care for both parents daily. Evelyn brought her a bouquet of fresh roses. "I'm sorry to trouble you, but will you confirm what you saw?" Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. "I saw Mark every night. I'll speak the truth." Evelyn squeezed her hand, strength quietly gathering. Align, organize evidence alone wasn't enough. Evelyn needed to arrange and connect it in order. Harris instructed, "We'll build a timeline. John's hospitalization, the day he wrote the will, the notarization, and all of Mark's actions during that period. Mark spent hours at the wooden table piecing it together. Receipts for medicine, doctor's appointment reminders, photos of John in bed. Every detail proved John was lucid and that Mark was always there. Evelyn requested Harris to get formal confirmation from the notary office. Days later, they received a letter. The will of John Carter, with witness signatures and certified seals, remains valid and enforceable. Evelyn exhaled deeply. This is the backbone. Everything else will orbit around it. They also organized witnesses. Margaret would testify to Mark's care. An uncle, once skeptical, agreed to stand as well after Harris showed him the notarized copy. I was wrong to doubt. I'll speak the truth, he admitted. Evelyn answered softly, truth is the only fortress we have. Gamble? Risk. The next step was risk. Harris warned, there are dangers. If the court rejects the tapes or the emails for lacking legal standards, we could lose everything. Evelyn understood the risks. Witnesses might be threatened into silence, evidence might be dismissed, and public opinion already leaned toward David and Linda. Still, she chose to gamble. Evelyn decided not to unleash all the evidence at once. Instead, she let David and Linda grow overconfident. At a family gathering, Linda cried theatrically, "Mom just wants the house for Mark. She's no longer in her right mind." Evelyn simply replied, "The court will decide." To others, she looked weak. But behind the scenes, Harris had already filed a dossier with the court. Emails, Margaret's testimony, and the notary's confirmation. Mark fretted, "Mom, what if they forge more evidence?" Evelyn clasped his hand, her eyes fierce. "Let them overreach. The greedier they are, the deeper they bury themselves, and by then, we'll have enough." Edge, the final advantage. Evelyn had one last card, kept even from Harris. John's final recording. His voice frail but clear. "This house is the soul. It belongs only to Evelyn and Mark. This is my final decision." Evelyn locked it in a small box, tucked in her dresser drawer. "Only when the moment comes will I reveal this," she whispered. Her edge wasn't the number of documents, it was the emotional weight of that single truth. It could be a double-edged sword. If deemed fake, everything would collapse. But if accepted, it would destroy David and Linda's wall of lies. For days, Evelyn and Mark lived in constant tension. By day, they tended roses and cooked simple meals, clinging to routine. By night, they combed through files with Harris. On the wooden table, papers stacked high, red tabs marked every detail. Evelyn pressed her hand on them, whispering, "John, I've prepared. Help me stand firm." But just when the plan seemed on track, an unexpected blow struck. One late evening, Margaret's voice shook over the phone. "I can't testify. Someone sent me a letter. They said my grandchildren will be in danger if I appear in court." Evelyn froze. The ceramic mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Mark rushed to gather the pieces. Harris's tone dropped heavy. "I expected they'd push, but not this far." Evelyn sat motionless in the dark, hand gripping the drawer that held John's last recording. She knew the enemy had begun breaking each link in her plan. If the key witness withdrew, their strategy could collapse. But in her eyes, a new fire rose. This revenge was no longer defense. It was war. Evelyn knew the time had come. Everything she, Mark, and Harris had prepared for weeks needed to fall into place. Each step was a chess move. One mistake and the board would collapse. Step 1, calculated silence. Her first strategy was silence. Around town, David and Linda spread their story. Evelyn was senile, manipulated by Mark, unfairly keeping the house. People looked at her with pity, sometimes contempt. But Harris understood. "The more they talk," he whispered, "the more proof we gather of their intent." At a family gathering, Linda stood and said with trembling voice, "We can't let Mom keep the house forever. Fairness means dividing it equally." Evelyn calmly replied, "The court will decide." Her composure rattled Linda. Losing patience, Linda blurted, "Keeping the house is a waste. Sell it, at least we'll have money." The slip revealed her true motive. Mark quietly noted it down. Step 2, submitting evidence. After nights of preparation, Harris produced the first bundle of files, Linda's old emails, John's original journal, and a certified copy from the notary office. But the highlight was one recording, a phone call, saved years ago by a former friend of Linda. In it, Linda's voice cut like ice. "I don't care about Mom. As long as we sell the house, David and I can pay off the debt. Mark won't keep anything." The audio was sharp, untouched. Harris told Evelyn, if the court accepts this, it's a dagger. Step 3. Family confrontation. Before court, Evelyn decided to test the blow within the family circle. At the next gathering, she placed a recorder on the table. Linda's voice echoed through the room, slicing the air with every word. Aunt covered her mouth in shock, and Uncle frowned deeply. Linda's face drained, then she shouted, "This is fake. We'll sue for defamation." Evelyn didn't argue. She said quietly, "Let the court decide." The balance didn't shift completely, but a crack had formed in the family's blind trust. Step 4. The courtroom battle. On the day of trial, the courtroom was packed. Evelyn sat beside Harris, hands trembling but eyes fierce. Across from her, David and Linda arrived, confident, with Richard sitting behind them, expression cold, like a director pulling strings. Harris laid out the files, one by one, the notarized will, Margaret's testimony, Linda's emails, and the phone recording. For a moment, momentum tilted toward Evelyn. Linda's own words filled the courtroom. "I don't care about Mom, I just need money." Murmurs erupted, eyes turned, suspicious now of Linda and David. Major setback. Then came the counterattack. David and Linda's lawyer introduced an audio expert. Standing tall, he declared, "This recording shows data distortion, waveform irregularities. Its integrity cannot be confirmed." Richard pressed harder. "The source file was not handled under proper custody. It cannot be admitted as valid evidence." The room gasped. Whispers spread. Some relatives shook their heads. "If she's innocent, why record in secret?" Evelyn froze. Her heart dropped. Harris leaned close. "We still have the will. Stay steady." But Evelyn felt the once solid ground cracking beneath her. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat in the dark living room, hands brushing over keepsakes. Mark entered, eyes anxious. "Mom, if the evidence is thrown out, we'll lose everything." Evelyn looked at him, her voice slow but firm. "No, we still have the law, we still have the truth. We'll rely on what cannot be denied." Harris suggested, "We need reinforcement. I'll file a timeline, John's notarization, his medical treatments, receipts, messages, and we'll request independent handwriting analysis on that forged note." Evelyn nodded. "Do it. The more lies they weave, the more chances we have to expose them." Mark rushed everywhere, collecting pharmacy receipts, nurse records showing his nightly care, photos with timestamps. Margaret, despite the threats, finally stood tall. "I've lived here all my life. I won't stay silent while truth is twisted." Evelyn hugged her, hope flickering back. At the next hearing, Harris presented the reinforced case. The notarized will was verified again, signatures intact, seals unbroken. A grainy hallway video from the notary office flickered on screen. John Carter, cane in hand, signing before witnesses. Silence filled the room. Linda's face paled. David gripped his chair, but Richard refused to yield. Rising, voice sharp. "All of this is staged. We will bring forward new evidence." Evelyn stared back into his eyes. She felt it. This war was not over. That night, Evelyn sat by herself. She opened the drawer, her fingers brushing a small locked box. Inside, John's final recording. His last words, frail but undeniable. "This house is the soul. It belongs only to Evelyn and Mark. This is my final decision." Evelyn whispered, "If they take one more step, I'll end this." She shut the drawer, eyes hard as steel. The battle was near its end, but still one last move remained. The small-town courtroom in Texas was packed to the brim that day. The cold neon lights cast a harsh glow over tense faces. On the bench sat the judge, stern and immovable. On one side, Evelyn sat with Harris and Mark. Her hands trembled, but her eyes held steady resolve. Across from them, David, Linda, and Richard leaned back in their chairs with smug half-smiles, as if victory was already theirs. The atmosphere was thick, suffocating. One sharp breath could have shattered it. The judge's gavel struck, his voice sharp. "We will now hear the final presentation of evidence." David and Linda's attorney rose first, his words spilling fast, accusing Evelyn of senility, claiming Mark had manipulated her. He waved the forged handwritten note, then produced the so-called diary. Right on cue, Linda's tears fell. "I just want fairness from my mother," she sobbed. "Mark has made her forget that we are her children too." David slammed his hand on the table, voice booming. "We demand justice. No one has the right to steal our inheritance." Their plea, wrapped in false martyrdom, drew murmurs from the gallery. Some eyes drifted toward Evelyn with doubt. Then Harris stood, calm, unwavering. "Today," he said, "we will present not words but truth through evidence." Evelyn rose beside him, her voice hoarse yet strong. "I've been silent for too long. It's time for the truth to speak." Harris opened the folder. One by one, the weapons of truth came to light. Evidence number 1, the fake email. Harris pointed to irregular timestamps, proving the email was created after John's death. An independent expert confirmed, this is an edited fabrication, not a valid email. A ripple spread through the room. Several relatives shifted, glancing at David with suspicion. Evidence number 2, the forged note. Harris lifted the yellowed sheet, along with a handwriting analysis. This writing does not match Evelyn's true signature. More than that, the ink used was manufactured only a few years ago. Old paper, but new ink. "It is a forgery," gasps erupted. A few family members dropped their heads, ashamed they had ever believed it. Evidence number 3, the altered journal. Harris placed John's original journal beside the doctored version Linda had submitted. He pointed out the cuts, the pasted pages, the crude glue lines. The judge himself examined the book, nodding grimly. Linda's face paled, her eyes darting, the mask of control slipping. Evidence number 4, the phone recording. This time, Harris presented the independent lab report. The file is untouched. No edits, only quality loss from an old device. Integrity confirmed. Then the recording filled the courtroom. Linda's voice, icy and selfish. "I don't care about Mom. I just need the house sold so David and I can pay our debt." Outrage rippled like a storm. An uncle leapt to his feet. "And you dare cry about fairness?" Linda shook violently, stammering, That's not me." But the voice was undeniable. No one believed her anymore. The courtroom buzzed with anger, but Harris wasn't finished. He looked at Evelyn. She nodded, her hands trembling, as she opened a small case. From it, she pulled the old tape recorder, the secret ace. She pressed play. John Carter's voice filled the room, frail yet crystal clear. "This house is the soul of our family. It belongs only to Evelyn and Mark. This is my final decision." The silence that followed shattered into chaos. Aunts sobbed openly. One buried her face in her hands. "John," he made it clear. An uncle who had once sided with David turned, his finger stabbing the air at Linda. "You betrayed this family. Your greed has destroyed everything." David exploded, screaming, "It's fake! All of it is fake!" But his voice cracked, sweat soaking his shirt. Linda clutched her face, eyes wild with panic. Richard, silent orchestrator, the hidden puppeteer, finally broke. He lowered his gaze, pulled his hand away from Linda's grip, and sat back, distancing himself, as if discarding a pawn, no longer useful. The judge's gavel thundered, his voice cut through the uproar. After reviewing all evidence, the court rules. The will of John Carter is valid, with no sign of coercion. All assets, including the Carter family home, belong to Evelyn Carter. The forged materials submitted by David and Linda will be turned over for criminal investigation. The gavel fell again, each strike a sentence against greed. Consequences struck immediately. Linda collapsed onto her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. David shouted, lunging toward Mark, but was held back by deputies. Richard stood quietly, not sparing his wife a glance, then turned and walked out alone. The crowd's eyes bore into David and Linda, a mix of disgust and disappointment. Their tears now seemed nothing but hollow theater. Evelyn sat still, her eyes were red but steady. She did not smile, she did not cheer. Relief washed over her like a heavy burden finally set down. Harris leaned close. "You did it, truth has prevailed." Evelyn whispered back, "No, John did, he's been vindicated." As the trial ended, relatives approached. One by one, they shook Evelyn's hand, apologizing for doubting her. An aunt wept, "You preserved the family's honor." Evelyn nodded, clutching the will and the recorder close to her chest. David and Linda were escorted out, facing investigation for perjury and forgery. The old Carter house remained untouched, a living monument to love, sacrifice, and justice. When Evelyn stepped outside, the Texas sky stretched wide and clear. Sunlight fell across her face, warm yet streaked with tears. She whispered into the breeze, "John, I kept my promise." Justice served. After the trial, David and Linda were no longer the poor children they had pretended to be. Their reputations crumbled to dust. News spread quickly across the small Texas town, how they had faked evidence against their own mother. Friends turned away. The community shunned them. David was the first to fall. Bankruptcy hit hard. Old debts he had hidden for years now came crashing down. Creditors pounded on his door, forcing him to sell off the last of his possessions. One by one, the little he had left disappeared. Finally, he packed his bags, leaving town with nothing but the shameful title, the son who betrayed his own mother. Linda's fate was even more tragic. Richard, her husband, the man who had pulled strings from the shadows, walked out right after the verdict, abandoning her in disgrace. No husband, no friends, no reputation left. Alone and broken, Linda too was forced to leave town, carrying the weight of humiliation into a lonely future. The long-term effects hit them full force. Loss of honor, loss of family, and loss of any future they thought they had. Meanwhile, Evelyn finally returned to the life she had long fought to protect. The Carter house stood strong, her sanctuary. Each morning she brewed her coffee in the chipped ceramic mug John had once held. She tended the roses he had planted, their petals still blooming with quiet resilience. In the evenings, she and Mark sat together, flipping through John's old journal. This was new normal protag. A quieter life, still scarred by betrayal, but at peace. Evelyn knew her family would never be whole again, but at least the truth had been preserved. At a family gathering not long after, the uncle who had once sided with David and Linda slowly approached. He placed a hand on Evelyn's shoulder and spoke softly. "I was wrong to doubt you, but now I see, you were the one who honored this family. If John were here, he would be proud." Evelyn smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. That uncle became the char, a small spark of humanity left in a family once torn apart by greed. And so, the Carter home remains standing on the edge of town, not just a house, but a testament. Proof that justice may come late, but it always comes. Motherhood is priceless, but when greed clouds the mind, even blood ties can turn into the sharpest blade. Justice can restore the truth, but it can never fully heal a broken heart. The story of Evelyn Carter has ended, but its echoes remain. So let me ask you, if you were in Evelyn's place, would you choose forgiveness for David and Linda? Or would you let justice punish them? Do you believe family bonds are strong enough to survive betrayal? Or are some wounds only closed when the truth is finally revealed? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Every opinion matters, and yes, we read them all. And if you want to keep following more revenge stories, where betrayal pays a price, where truth comes out, and where justice always finds its voice, don't forget to hit subscribe to True Revenge Stories, tap like, and share this video so more people can witness these powerful tales. Every single day, we bring you a new story, a new journey, and a new lesson to reflect on. Now that you've reached the end of Evelyn's heartbreaking chapter, here's one last question. Which story in our playlist will surprise you even more? Click and discover for yourself, because the next tale might just send chills down your spine and leave you with a lesson you'll never forget.